So welcome. My name is Phil McDougall. I'm the president of the National Automobile Museum, and we're so glad to have you here today. We are really, really excited about this evening, but what we're going to do is I'm just going to walk you through a couple of things that we're going to be announcing, and we're pretty excited about it. So most importantly, we're very excited to be partnering with Nevada Indy. So this is their event, but we also have several ones to complement it. So let's just give them a hand for pulling this together first. A lot of work went into this. We are announcing here today that we're really excited. We are opening, by breaking ground on Monday at our new Children's Educational Activity Center. We couldn't be more excited about it, so our board of directors got together and they said we want to add another component. This is part of it. It's going to be 3,000 square feet, and it's just going to rock this place. So it's going to be an education element to the museum that is going to be unequaled. So this is a part of it right now that we're looking forward to. And if I could, I'm going to go into, actually, now?
Yeah.
Really? Well, this is kind of a surprise, everybody. We have some people that are all around that are excited about this project. So I just got word that we have some Zoom calls. Some people are going to jump in here and just to say thank you and give us some support. So I don't know how this is going to work, but my understanding is they're just coming in now. Wow. Sounds important. Oh my gosh. President Reagan. This is amazing. Zoom.
Well, Phil, Nancy and I were just talking, and we think you need to tear down that wall in Gallery 3 and just start building it now.
Wow, we're actually going to be breaking ground on Monday. Thank you, Mr. President. That's amazing. Oh, look who else is coming in to join us today.
Well, hello, Phil. This is President Bush. Read my lips. You know, we're going to raise the money needed to build the exhibit. You know, if we didn't, Phil, it wouldn't be fair. It wouldn't be prudent.
Well, we think it's a big deal, and we're excited about it. I understand we have someone else. We've got a few people calling in today. Wow, President Clinton's showing us.
Phil, President Clinton here. I heard you have a big project underway at the museum. And there are rumors it's already been fully funded. I know something about rumors and misinformation. Hang in there. I'm sure you'll raise the money. Hey, hurry up, Joe. Phil's got a room full of people waiting.
Well, it's a rumor. Oh, my gosh.
Come on, man. Give me a break. Phil, this is President Biden.
President Biden, thank you so much for joining. I'm sorry, but we're getting bumped out. We kind of bagging up here on these calls. Wow. Sorry, but I didn't mean to cut him off.
Hello, Phil. This is President Trump. I'm 100% behind you. We are going to make the National Automobile Museum great again. We are going to build the walls around the Children's Activity Center, and it's going to be great.
Well, it's not actually walls, but it's little pony things, but it's pretty cool. We got some pictures outside for everybody to look at. I'd say there's one more person going to call in. This is unusual. Wow.
Hello, Phil. This is President Nixon here. Pardon me for jumping in here at the end, but I just want you to know I've been trying to log into the call. I guess I kept hitting the erase button by mistake. I hate when that happens. In any event, good luck with the project.
What a surprise. If you haven't understood, I got a chief thing. My job is to get your attention, showcase something we announced today for the very first time, and have a little fun at the same time. But the reason you're here today is something very, very different. I'm going to introduce Jon Ralston. Please come on up. He's the CEO of the Nevada Independent. Thank you very much, sir. He is the man of the hour. Yes, sir.
Hi, everybody. Are you going to stay up here? Oh, okay.
No, I'm going to get right down.
Phil will soon be appearing at the lounge at the Grand Sierra. You can catch him nightly. Actually, I got to tell you, Phil, this is such a great venue. I am absolutely blown away by the crowd that we got, and I want you to give yourselves a round of applause for coming tonight and supporting the Nevada Independent. Thanks to all of you for coming. The Nevada Independent has been a labor of love for me and the staff for about 7 years now, and we're going through some little bumps right now, and some of you may have read about that, and that's why this tonight is even more meaningful for us. And I want to thank Phil for making this possible. This is a great event. We're going to be doing one of these every quarter up here, and that means you get 3 more Phil slideshows. So we can look forward to that, and I appreciate it. So just a few housekeeping things. First of all, in addition to thanking all of you for being here tonight, I do want to thank all of our sponsors. You saw them up here before, but I want to read all of them. Hold your applause until the end, please. National Automobile Museum, of course, the Abbey Agency, Southwest Gas, NV Energy Foundation, Century Gaming, Nevada Mining Association, Kemper Kroll, Prominence Healthcare, Western States Petroleum Association, Tolls, Construction, Core Construction, the Raiders. Here we go. Black and Wadhams, the Castroverde Law Group, Carrera Nevada, Roseman University, Truckee Meadows Community College Foundation, the Nevada Donor Network, and Nevada Rural Housing. Let's give them all a round of applause for sponsoring this event. I realize from reading that list of sponsors, we basically can't cover anything now, staff, so I'm sorry to tell you that. I'm kidding. So just one other thing before we get started, and I bring the man of the hour up here. These conversations are meant to be conversations, civil discourse, which means all of you, I hope, will remain civil. No booing, either of the governor or probably of me, more likely, and no clapping either, if you would. This is meant to be an elevated conversation. It's what we do at the Indy. And so, without further ado, I want to bring up Governor Joe Lombardo.
No clapping.
I know. You can clap this one time, and maybe at the end. Governor, they told me you wanted to sit on the far left, which seems about right in today's Republican Party, doesn't it?
So you're gonna start off by telling fibs, right?
Yes, exactly. That's, it's a living.
Nobody
sir.
told me. I was told to sit over.
Oh, you were? Okay, all right.
I didn't want to sit.
You follow orders as well as I do. But before we get started, I do want to tell you something about this governor, and you can clap one more time before I start asking him some questions, and that is, this is the 3rd time, Governor, that you and I have sat on a stage like this since you were elected. It's unprecedented for a governor to be willing to do something like that. I mean, I'm not known as the most fun guy in the world to sit across from, and so the governor deserves a round of applause for doing 3 of these events. And I love that tonight he said he's going to go until midnight. This is going to be fun. So, Governor, we built this, and
Can I cut you off already?
of course.
All right. Before we get into it, and unfortunately, John, in the situation the Nevada Independent was put in here recently, I think it's important that we recognize your staff that's here. Would that be okay?
They are the best.
Can you guys wave
stand
your
up.
hands there? And before I go any further, there's one other person I want to introduce. Well, actually, there's 2. One is my wife. Where did she go? She's right up here front. And then, and quite often in state government, nobody cares who the governor is. They care who the chief of staff is, right? Because they tend to get the job done. And I have a new chief of staff. Everybody knows Ben Keycaffer decided to move on to greener pastures. But Ryan Cherry, all the way in the back in the corner, standing up there. So as we leave tonight and you want confirmation on some of the numbers I throw out there, he's the guy. So, all right?
You got numbers for me? Oh, I am looking forward to this very much.
Thank you for indulging me.
Of course, and I appreciate your kind words about the staff of the Independent. They are the backbone of the news organization. I'm just a pretty face, but you already figured that part out. So let's talk, Governor. We talked about doing this, and I talked about doing a look back and a look ahead. And so let's start with the look back. And we talked about this too, but let's hear your candid grade for yourself after, 14 months or so in office.
Great question, and I was presented that question by you not that long ago, right?
In private.
And hopefully you'll tell me what your rebuttal was.
Well, I just want to see if you give the same grade now that you did about a month and a half ago.
I said a B plus.
You did.
I said a B plus, and Mr. Ralston said a little bit higher. So
I did?
I think so.
Were you recording that or not?
Yeah, I was.
Okay, all right.
I wasn't on the telephone. I was in person, so I could record it. So. Yeah, single-party consent. But the B plus, and I stand by that rating, and I think the more I thought about it and the discourse, not the discourse, but the back and forth that you and I had referenced that rating, I still said, I think it was because of the nuance and the newness of the position and the unknown and the unawareness and just the ignorance of exactly how state government worked through the process. And it was drinking from a fire hose in the beginning, and that's unfortunate because of the system and where the election process starts. You're elected in short order, you're sworn in, and in shorter order, you're submitting a budget that you had nothing to do with, and then you start the legislative session. So there was a lot of learning on the fly, but I think I assimilated well. And the biggest part of this is, you're thinking, well, you're the governor, and was your background conducive to you having success there? I think part of it was, but more importantly, was the people that Ben and I picked to help through the process. You're only as good as the people that support you, right? And my staff was magnanimous. So.
Did you know there would be that many Democrats running around?
I didn't know there would be that many adversarial folks, on both sides. On both sides, we talk about polarization, bipartisan, but on both sides, it was a little more discourse than I had expected.
So, 75 vetoes was a record.
Unfortunately.
Yeah, and you say unfortunately. 75 vetoes means that there was a lack of communication. I don't know any other way to describe it.
I have a different way to describe it.
Okay, maybe there is another way.
Well, and I've said this publicly, so this isn't breaking news. I think it was communication and partisanship. I think it was a test of my fortitude and willing to stand for what I believed in. And it was a test by the people from the opposite party seeing what I was willing to withstand.
But weren't they standing up for what they believed in as well, as opposed? I mean, you could label either of you partisan, right?
Yeah, you can. You're exactly right. But additionally, there's some experienced people in the process, especially in leadership, and some of the legislation that came to my desk was unacceptable and should have never reached my desk. And I think that was a test.
But didn't you talk to them about that before they sent it to your, were they unwilling to tell you they were going to send you what you call these unacceptable bills?
Absolutely.
Really?
Yes.
So they were surprises to you when they got to your desk?
Well, I don't know. I guess it would be a little naivete to say it was a surprise.
Or maybe Ben wasn't doing his job? What do you think? I'm kidding. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
Whoa.
I'm kidding.
Tough crowd.
My God, yeah. I mean, it's a joke, Ben.
But either way, we got through the process, and I think we had a very successful legislative session, and it may depend on your own personal frame of reference.
How was it successful? How was it?
Well, a lot of the bills that I proposed, as far as economic development and education and public safety and health care and mental health resources, a lot of that made it through the process.
What was your I mean, if you had to distill it to one thing that you were proudest of that came out of the session, what was it?
The proudest was school safety. You know, I had opined, or I stood at the dais when I was running through the campaign and said I wanted to be the education governor because the doldrums or the inefficiencies or the ineffective education process through the state of Nevada. And over the decades, not just in the last, administration, it was been over the decades. And part of what a lot of the folks or the experts or the people that are self-proclaimed experts or, the actual experts and the teachers and administrators and everybody in the education space told me one of the key components of some of the failure was the inability to feel safe in the school environment, both for the teachers, the administrators, and the students. And it was a hot-fought battle. There was restorative justice was a well-intended piece of legislation that come forward in previous administration, but the unintended consequences were prevalent, and I thought we needed to change it.
Did anything really surprise you, Governor?
Lack of communication. That surprised me. I thought there would be a lot more robust, honest communication, not just false communication that would take place between all the parties involved. And that really surprised me.
You really think that the Democrats, and by that I mean the leadership, acted in bad faith?
No, I wouldn't.
That's essentially what you're saying.
No, I wouldn't say that. I just think that was more of a testament to a change of party and leadership, and it was maybe it was a little bit of filling me out, but I don't think it was bad faith. I think everything was well intended. So,
you still think the best of people?
Remember, I was a police officer for 35 years.
So let's start to look forward a little bit. You've gotten more acclimated. You survived your first legislative session. What worries you most about Nevada right now?
There's a couple things. One is first and foremost is affordable housing and the ability for people to have a quality of life and what is expected from the state government in support of their quality of life and the discourse between individuals. And I don't know if you're going to ask me about the recent issue that happened with my family, but that rises to a different level. Oh, by the way, hang on, a little segue. I brought John a little gift here. And part of in the daily life of a governor, you get to do some cool things. And for those of you who may not know, it's reading week in the state of Nevada. And I had the opportunity to go over to elementary school today in Carson City. And this is fifth graders apply for a contest and via their art for reading week. And this is the one that won. And I wore it during the reading of some kindergartners and fifth graders, and I brought it for John.
Thank you. Governor, I appreciate it. It's all it takes to get me to go easy on you, a shirt.
Yeah.
I'm easy.
But what was the question?
Well, I asked you about what worries you the most, and you mentioned affordable, and you were talking about, I wasn't going to ask you about, because I think that's a personal thing but we're going to talk about affordable housing, certainly, and you can talk about that if you want, but you said there were two things that worry you.
Education. And, the promise to be an education governor and showing movement in that space for the betterment of all the kids in the future of the state of Nevada. Which is part of early development and reading week and everything else that goes along with it.
So you brought up two subjects I was going to ask you about anyhow, and I think education is probably the most important issue in many ways, but let's start with the first one you mentioned, which is affordable housing. A lot of your critics over in the other building said you could have done something about affordable housing. You vetoed a lot of bills that the Democrats proposed. There is a feeling that this state has a lot of landlord-friendly and tenant-unfriendly bills, that the summary eviction process is not fair, and that you are responsible, Governor, because I'm playing devil's advocate here in case you haven't noticed. You are responsible behaving in a very partisan way and perhaps behaving as the business community, the realtors, others would like to see you behave, vetoing bills that would have helped make housing more affordable. Do you regret vetoing any of those bills?
No, I don't. And here's the reason why. Affordable housing is a very complicated issue, and the simple fact that you don't have summary eviction, or you do have summary eviction, has no effect on affordable housing. Okay, so you have...
Has an effect on people's quality of life,
Yeah,
doesn't it?
that's true. But, so, you know, I don't know if you saw the protesters out front, and that was directly related to landlord-tenant issues. I have the opposite opinion, and I feel like I'm well-educated and well-studied on this particular issue, and part of it is availability, okay? So when we say affordable housing, so we have, within the state level, we have ARPA funding that we're directing towards that, Homes Means Nevada. We have the infrastructure bank with low percentage rates for builders to apply for, to build affordable housing. And at the cost of the land and the construction and inflation and interest rates and everything that's part of that package makes it impossible to have affordable housing. Okay, and the fact that rent control is still a conversation of topic as a solution for affordable housing is a fallacy. For every one article in the positive space of rent control, there's 20 articles that say the opposite. And you have to be objective, and you have to be educated, and you have to understand the economics of it to understand it. So, unfortunately, in the state of Nevada, we are absolutely hamstrung in the availability of land, and that's at the fault and the detriment of the federal government and Bureau of Land Management. And when Bureau of Land Management finds it feasible to release land, so in order that we can, build upon it, it's up front. She can attest to this because she's been working on this in her entire tenure as the mayor, and to me, that's the stopgap associated with it. It isn't because I'm friendly to the landlords versus the tenants. That economic theory doesn't play out.
But let me ask you this, and let me, with due respect, push back on that a little bit.
Okay.
Because here's how I translate what you just said, and I don't think you're going to like the translation, but let me try. So this state got crushed during COVID. You know that. You're partly governor, unfortunately, because of that probably. But there is a sense, and maybe there's even facts to back this up, Governor, but I don't want to get into the weeds here, that landlords took advantage of the laws that exist. People were evicted. People were thrown out of place. The courts were jammed with people trying to adjudicate this stuff that they say was slanted against them in the NRS. And here you are tonight, the most powerful man in this state, throwing up his hands and say, well, it's a federal issue, the BLM won't give me land. Did I translate correctly?
50% of it. I'm not throwing up my hands.
What can you do?
I made a promise to work on that. One is we talked about ARPA, we talked about infrastructure bank, me having a positive or proactive or an aggressive conversation with the treasurer and saying, hey, we be more active in delegating the bonds and the monetary function of affordable housing in this space. It's inventory. It's supply and demand. It's inventory, supply and demand. And the reason why we suffered was because our lack of diversity in the economy, right? We don't have an economy conducive to high wages in the majority, all right? And that's what we're trying to change. That's what we're trying to change now. So to make it more affordable for individuals to be successful and achieve that quality of life.
So you don't think any of these landlord-tenant laws need to be changed?
Oh, yeah, I absolutely. But the ones that were brought forward to me, I wasn't absolute in that. I think there was well over 28 landlord-tenant laws that came forward. I didn't veto all 28 of them, but they have to be measured, they have to be evaluated, you have to be educated on the particular issue, and you have to remove the emotion from it and have an understanding what's the benefit of the whole versus the few.
So do you think, obviously I'm going to ask you some questions about the next session, it's a long ways away, but can you think of any laws that you would propose to help with the affordable housing crisis that you just named as one of the two things that you're worried about?
Let's go back to the crush, right? Why we suffered as much. what is unknown to some people, I'm sure the majority in this room, because it's a well-educated audience, is we were the last on unemployment benefit continuance to stop them, okay? And we were the last to cease rent moratoriums in the state. And so what does that lead to? Unemployment. People not forced, their hands are not being forced to get out into society and apply for a job and accept a job and work your way through the process. What we are also the last on is wage standard. And that's where we're suffering as a state. And it's my goal to diversify that economy and bring those companies in here that changes that quality of life.
But there's not any legislation that you're thinking of proposing specifically on this?
No, that'll be evaluated as it comes. I'm not going to, guess on that, and each one will be evaluated as it comes forward.
So you've already learned, even though you're young in your gubernatorial political life, the whole, I'm not going to answer hypotheticals, John?
That's exactly it. I anticipate there'll be a few of those tonight, so.
So let's talk about education.
Sure.
A little bit. I'm going to quote you from your State of the State, and let me tell you what you said. Tonight, I'm proposing the single largest investment in K through 12 education and raising the bar on expectations and accountability to a level not yet seen in Nevada. And if we don't begin seeing results, you said, Governor, I'll be standing here in 2 years calling for systematic changes to the governance and leadership in K through 12 education. Where do we stand right now? Is the investment paying off?
It's still unknown. Still unknown. So there's a lot of stools, legs in that stool, right? So you got teacher pipeline, you got teacher pay, you have curriculum, you have infrastructure, you have wraparound services, everything that is involved in the total education package, right? So that significant investment addresses all of that. And they all got to work together and be synonymous for success, in my opinion. All right, so and it's too short order for the testing to evaluate that. The accountability piece is a huge detriment to me in my understanding of the process. So we have this active accountability matrix that we provided to measure the students and the administration of those students and make decisions of whether they're a viable practice or a functioning organization. But I don't have a hammer. I don't have a sledgehammer. I don't have anything in that accountability matrix. So we can put measurements, this is where your kids need to be, and this measures success, okay? And if you're not meeting that, we have a problem with the system, all right? And is it the superintendent? Is it the education? Is it the curriculum provided by the State Board of Education? You have to find those answers, right?
No, you have to.
Yeah. I said we have to. I didn't say you.
Okay.
I said we have to find those answers and make a determination what is the leverage point of change. There's nothing codified or identified in the NRS that, when Velardita from CCEA was talking about ownership or stewardship or receivership with the Clark County School District, there's not a mechanism for that. And the State Department of Education doesn't have the resources or the ability to do that. So those are the things we identified that have to be addressed. And so when I go into the next session, which I said in the State of the State, in 2 years of systematic change, that's what it is. One of them is measurements and tools to ensure that accountability takes place and the ability to act on that accountability. And the ability to determine the audit of the audits, whether the money was spent appropriately.
And you did an audit of the audit
Right.
by executive order. It came out, and there were a lot of different adjectives used, including the adjective disturbing. And you actually mused, and maybe you regret doing this, saying maybe that was a waste of money, all that money you put in.
So it's funny when you say mused, maybe that was a waste of money. That's not accurate. I don't know if it's on a recording or not. What I said was, I didn't understand. You said in the audit, the narrative in the audit provided by the Governor's Office of Audits, it was that, what is it, $2 billion was a waste of money. And I said, you're saying this was an absolute waste of money. Is that what you're saying? And I said, that's troublesome to me because we always said we had an injection for the per pupil funding formula to change the paradigm of education. and now you're saying I wasted the money. And the retort on that was, no, maybe that's worded wrong. The worded wrong is how you spend the money. And the biggest solution reference to spending of money was teacher-student ratio in continuance of that audit in the narrative. And how do you change the student-teacher ratio? One is infrastructure, one is teacher pipeline, right? Appropriate pay to make sure they stay there to prevent the attrition levels, all those things that go along with it. And I said, well, all these accountability things that we put into place and the design of the spend of that money, we don't know the results yet. So you're already opining and making a non-objective determination that we wasted $2 billion.
So I guess what I'd say, Governor, and unfortunately I'm old enough to remember back when other governors talked about we need to reduce the teacher-student ratio, we need class size reduction, we need more money, and we need more accountability. But we're still in the same place, where people have a very negative view of the school district, of the kind of education their kids are getting in that state. And I would think as governor, any governor, that would really bother you, and you would really finally want to do something about that.
You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. So there was a law passed on student-teacher ratio, right? The districts had to meet these certain percentages for teacher versus student, and what was the enforcement on it, right? Quite often, especially with my previous career, ill-thought-out laws come from up on high, and they're pushed down because they think it'll change, society or attitude or whatever the law was intended to do. Who's going to enforce it? The same situation now in education. You talk about student-teacher ratio, and my question was, no matter how many laws or threats or holding back of funding and everything goes along with it, how is this district going to change that ratio? It's still all the legs of the stool. And so it's my job to ensure that every leg of that stool is being addressed and priority is put to it.
There are a couple things in that audit I wanted to talk to you about.
But let me back up before you...
Okay.
In the accountability page, everybody talked about accountability, right? But no measurement tools were ever provided other than what came out of the federal space. So let's make it in tune to conducive to what we're dealing with in the state of Nevada. That's what we did with the accountability matrix. Now those measurement tools have been identified, they're in place, everybody's educated and aware of it. Now let's see what happens.
What are you going to do if they don't meet them?
That's what we're going at in the next session. We're identifying those tools to have some response to not meeting the measurements.
So you'll have education fixed by the next session?
Oh, God, no.
So
you talk about how long it takes to turn a battleship. It's longer in education, right? And remember I said this is a decade-old problem. It can't be solved in my first term, and hopefully we'll have significant movement in my second term. Did you hear that?
You're announcing for re-election tonight. See, breaking news. It's early. There were a couple things in that audit that I thought were very, very disturbing. One was that it found fewer than half of third graders were proficient in reading, and the standards are also too low, Governor. That is a huge, huge problem, because obviously there is for lack of a better description, a trickle-up effect from that, right? And then you have the problems that gets to high school dropouts, a lot of things going on, graduation rates. What are you going to do about that?
So it's even worse, right? If you think about this, repeat the stats you just said.
So it said that there are fewer than half of the third graders are proficient in reading, and it also said the standards should be raised for literacy.
So imagine if we raise the standard to what the national standard should be. That half is going to be a lot lower, right? It's going to be a lot lower.
So it's too late to fix it, or?
No. But what we have identified, so you had modification of read by three. The idea and the theory and the implementation was moving under Governor Sandoval. Then there was some regression, in my opinion, under Governor Sisolak. And then now subsequently I get elected, and all the experts are saying read by three is the measurement tool as you described, right? And I believe in. as future success. So let's set the standard. Let's put our resources and curriculum and dedication to Read by 3 and fund it, and let's get some results.
Should kids be held back?
I think so.
Yeah.
I think so.
That's devastating.
There's some, there's circumstances for every measurement of that. But I do believe they should, because you're just setting them up for failure. When we talk about career or college ready upon graduating high school, it's directly related to that, all the way down to the 3rd grade. And we have such flawed and low percentages even in that space. So we changed the curriculum to make it easier to say, I graduated, all right? But we didn't change the curriculum to the better on actually educated. And so we have this huge number of graduation percentages that is presented, but it's a false flag. It's a red flag. And the kids that are college ready or career ready are de minimis. And it's just to get them past that point, feel good about what you're doing as a superintendent or any other administrator, and ensure that you're receiving federal funding to help support your flawed system.
One of the other things that the auditors talked about, and a lot of parents in here are going to be able to relate to this, had to do with school lunches. And they said you need to expand the school lunch program, and you vetoed an expansion of the school lunch program. And I'm wondering, that can really affect the ability to learn. I think you'll agree, Governor. Do you regret that veto?
I didn't expand school lunch
You
program.
regret, you vetoed.
I didn't veto it.
You didn't?
No.
What did you do?
I vetoed the COVID era school lunch program.
You thought it was COVID's over, we don't need it anymore?
No. The school lunch program was identified way before COVID, and it was in place. And it was funded both by the state and the feds for Title I schools and kids that qualified. All right? It was a successful, viable system that was in place prior to COVID. COVID comes. The federal government says, well, because of all the kids and all the situation associated with not being in school, or whether you are in school, all the nuances across the board, we're going to increase free lunch and free breakfast under COVID with federal money to the totality on top of Title I schools. Survey and evaluation of that program, 70% of the meals were thrown in the trash, because you had kids that were in well-to-do neighborhoods receiving that free lunch and everything that goes across the board. So COVID's over. We regress back to the system and the programs that were in place prior to COVID. I didn't get rid of free lunches. It went back to the system where it was present. What I did stop, there was availability and continuance of breakfast and lunch, maybe for an additional 6 months to a year at the cessation of the federal funding in the coffers. But I'm not going to throw good money after bad money to have kids throw it in the trash. And so what we did was ensure that those kids that qualified and the Title I schools continue to receive those meals.
Isn't a lot of this education budget, and maybe the budget as a whole, built in a house of cards? Because so much of that federal money came in and allowed you to put that infusion in, but that money's not going to be there again.
You're exactly right. And what we did on that, so there's two issues associated. One is you're right. Is there a fiscal cliff here in the future, right? So we injected with the federal stimulus monies, $2 billion, and our ability to reprogram monies in the general fund to ensure that we were funding education. So how do we continue that? One is we identified the sources that is part of the education funding formula and ensure that those could not be modified, touched, or removed. And the budget folks are telling me we can do it as long as we don't touch that money. And that's what we did, Mayor. The marijuana money, it was to go to education unless the general fund wasn't balanced. Okay, all those, there's a cessation of that, and all those are codified and you can't touch it. So we're going to work through those budget measures as we go forward.
I mean, you're going to hit a fiscal cliff, no matter what.
I believe we are. I believe we are, and that's why things like 231, the extra $250 million that was provided by the Democratic side of the House, yes, I did sign it. Those kind of things really have to be evaluated at its face, and that's why it was so long and tedious before I put my signature on that bill.
Since you decided to use this venue to announce that you're running for re-election, do you also want to announce that, if necessary, you're going to have to raise taxes to make sure that fiscal cliff doesn't swallow?
No.
Is that a yes?
No.
Oh, I couldn't quite hear you.
I still feel we're solvent in the state, and government efficiency can be evaluated for all revenue sources, and will get us to where we need to be.
I do want to move on to some other topics. I think education, you and I seem to spend a lot of time talking about it because it is
Well, it's
so
the most important thing, right?
And I want to go back to something that you talked about right at the beginning, and it has to do with the safety in schools, which is something when you and I went to school, probably our parents didn't think about that much. Almost every parent thinks about it now. There was this recent survey that showed 40% of LGBTQ kids don't feel secure in school, but they're not the only ones. Are Nevada schools safe, Governor?
No, but we're getting there.
That's kind of a
Right.
scary thing to say, right?
Well, if you look at it being resource-driven, you talk about the police function within the school environment, the resources with that it was underfunded. It was underfunded. The allocation to different levels of schools, and whether it was every school or was particular schools that show a high level of violence, all that labor had to be marshaled. And the ability for a teacher to have effective mitigation on a troublesome student and having a plan for a student wasn't even in place. And so now there's a zero tolerance policy, with SB 330. And there's ability to remove the kid from the existing environment, put them in a different environment, work out a plan with the parental units and with the district, and then eventually try to get that individual kid back into the system. But it's proactive. It's ensuring that the teachers feel safe and the kids themselves feel safe, and there's a plan for the kid that is troubled. So you got resources on the law enforcement side, you got a plan for the kids that are disruptive and bringing them back into the system, and those have to work together. It's been short order. It's been 6 months. And if you look at the total numbers of violence that occurred outside of some high-profile major ones, where a kid lost his life, unfortunately, in the proximity of Rancho High School down in Las Vegas, those violence numbers have significantly decreased. So the program's working, but you spoke of a special group of individuals, right? That's education. That's education, and I think society in totality has come a long ways in that space.
You think you have?
I believe I have. Yeah, I absolutely believe I have. So.
And how has that manifested itself in
ensuring that we are educating our individuals, and we hold people accountable that are in the opposite of that opinion.
So let's move on to a few other topics, Governor, since we have until midnight, so I know we're going to cover a lot here. So early, I want to talk about the environment, which we haven't had a chance to talk about. I want to ask you, early in your governorship, you almost dramatically pulled the state climate plan away. You took it off the website. This was Governor Sisolak's state climate plan, but had a lot of support. You said it's going to be offline temporarily, and then you're going to be coming back with a plan of your own. What's the status of that? I think if I go click on the website right now, I'm not going to see anything, am I? Or am I going to see a state climate plan?
I don't believe you are. That's a great question. That's a great question.
It's the first one I asked you weren't expecting, huh?
I wasn't expecting whether it was online or not. But that's all synonymous in conjunction with the energy plan, right? And the carbon footprint and the climate plan, and what is your energy plan? So I pulled back because I thought our energy plan was regressive, and we weren't where we needed to be as a state in the energy policy. So here's a perfect example. in the last 2 months, what have you seen on a daily basis? NV Energy and PUC and Southwest Gas, right? And the costs associated with that. Imagine if we had removed some of those resources and without the expansion of green energy, what those prices would be. And, you know, there's some nuances as to why those prices are currently where they're at and where they're going to go here in the next couple months. But I believed in, you know, the stats and the documentation will be a testament to it, was we have to have a diversified energy policy. And a diversified energy policy has an effect on the environmental footprint in short order, but in the long order, until we have the resources to sustain us, we're going to have some pain. And what I mean by that, until the green energy space, the wind and solar and those type of energy resources are to the level that they can support the entire system, we're going to have to continue the path we're going on currently. And there's some things that people don't know. You know, there's a pullback by some energy that we're buying out of Washington via Oregon, via California into the state of Nevada, that California is refusing to allow us because of the detriment of their infrastructure and their grid and their inability to support their people and that carbon footprint idea that they had. And so we have to figure out how we have to continue to diversify and build to get to that safe space.
So that was pretty good, but you didn't really answer the question. And the question was, when are we going to see some kind of plan? It's been a long time since you pulled the state climate plan. It sounds like you're a bit of a green energy guy, right?
I am.
Okay, all right, you're a green energy guy.
I just want us to get there.
I want a T-shirt that says Lombardo's a green energy guy, okay? But seriously, I mean, we do need a plan. I mean, you believe in man-made climate change. I don't have to go through that, right?
No, you don't have to go through.
Okay, good. That's a yes, you believe in it.
Yeah, I believe
Okay,
in it.
all right. So, there are members of your party who don't, I got to tell you.
Well, there's members of your party that don't.
I'm an independent. We are the dominant party in this state, sir.
But to answer your question, I will get you an answer.
Okay.
I don't know what the answer is.
All right.
I can't put it on the website if it isn't written, so.
I gathered that part. Okay. All right. So let's talk about something that I haven't heard you talk about that much, and that's healthcare, which is a huge issue for a lot of people. What are your priorities in healthcare policy? What are you working on?
Mental health and Medicaid. Mental health and Medicaid. So when you talk about gun policies and what is the core to all that, and, you know, and people's, you know, homelessness and, you know, quality of life and scenic blight and everything that goes circular to health policy, is what is the reimbursement model associated with Medicaid for people that can't afford, you know, insurance, and whether you're young or old or whatever the malady is reimbursement for the providers. Are the providers leaving the state as a result of Medicaid or Medicare reimbursement, or are we going to do it at the appropriate level to ensure that they want to be here in the state of Nevada? So one of the biggest issues that we have in the state of Nevada is lack of providers. And that is a big part of it, Medicaid, and how we did it. So we did a significant increase in disbursement and payments in Medicaid here recently, and thanks to Ben Kekeffer and his knowledge of the subject and convincing me that's the direction we needed to go. But more importantly, I have 35 years of experience in mental illness, and that, to me, that's the core of homelessness, and that's the core of health issues, and especially when you talk about the youth. And it's no secret the DOJ just came down on the state of Nevada with a hammer, and we chose incarceration versus resources and help for the youth, and we're going to have to make some significant changes. As a result of that, you know, you always got to look for the silver lining, right? And what is the bright spot of them identifying and punishing you for it is, you know, through the hospital provider tax and matching with Medicaid and the feds, we're going to put $100 million in the biennium to children mental health. And nobody in the country can say that. Nobody in the country can say that, and we're going to continue that. Nobody applauded for that. So, Just so you know, John hates when I ask for applaud.
I
so.
don't.
But
If you want,
but that's what the key.
if you want to do the Jeb Bush please clap thing, you.
No. So recently, we're talking about ARPA fund clawback, right? And so ARPA funds that haven't been spent, they got to be spent by a certain period of time.
Right.
And if you don't, you lose it, right? So you never want to lose the benefit of that. And what is the design of ARPA fund? It's infrastructure and equipment. So there's rumors out there that we have several hundred millions of dollars of ARPA fund available. So everybody is calling me asking for money, right? And unfortunately, we can't fund what they say. So right now in today's data pool from my folks, we have $350 million in ARPA requests, and I have $43 million available. So to answer your question is, the first priority is mental health.
With those ARPA funds? Oh, that's great. That's good to hear, Governor. Because.
So you have.
But let me just pivot on. Don't get into the clapping now that he opened the door. But seriously, Governor. And I could see that you actually got a little emotional about that.
Yeah, I did.
Because you have a unique perspective on this, having been in law enforcement as long as you were, having seen the mental health problem and how it ravages people and people end up on the street. You know what the national rankings are. We're last in treatment of youth, about 40th or something in treatment of adults. Ben, when he was in the Senate, and a few of his colleagues talked about this and tried to do things, but it's hard to get a lot of momentum behind doing something about it. It doesn't have a natural constituency, for instance, even though it should, like education or like other things. So it's great that you're going to put those ARPA funds into it, but what else can you do to increase access, which is, you mentioned it, there's not enough services.
It was in the general fund too, we did that. We did that in the general fund, in graduate medical education, we did that to ensure that providers who are educated here stay here, right? And in the general fund, we put we have 6 mental health facilities, satellite facilities we're going to put throughout the state through the general fund. And then the ARPA funds, we're going to do it through the youth, okay? And on top of that is the Boys and Girl Club. Part of this is education. I know you asked about healthcare, but part of that, let's just segue back into the education piece and the Read by 3 and early intervention. The Boys and Girls Club is going to put satellite early education edifices throughout the state to help us in that endeavor. So it's the appropriate use of the funds available. It's one-shot money. It's not for continuance of operations, but it's the start of what we're trying to achieve in the healthcare space.
So let's.
Is your wife here?
She is.
Where is she?
I think she's right there.
Did I get a good answer on that?
Oh, see, she's a tough grader.
She's doing this.
She's a tough grader. Good. Believe me, I'll hear about it later, and I'll pass it on to you. So let's talk about economic development, because I know that you've mentioned how the lack of a diversified economy has been an issue, and it's been an issue forever, of course. Well, let me start with a very simple question. You ready for this one? Was F1 a success?
Yes.
It was?
Yes.
So you have no sympathy for all these businesses?
Oh, I have sympathy. I think it's a learning curve, right? It's a big to-do. It's 3.5-mile track through the major thoroughfare of our economic engine in southern Nevada, and its infrastructure that has to be built out as part of the process in a very short period of time. So that infrastructure is in place. You modify it, post a race, and it won't be the whole system won't be shut down for such a long period of time in the out years, and you figure out ways where you failed. So they hired a very competent person, Betsy Fretwell, to address that and community benefits and spreading the wealth to the surrounding businesses. And I don't know if subsidies is going to be a part of the picture moving forward, but it was an economic success. It was a PR failure.
How do you judge the economic success?
Well, the revenue that was benefited.
So all the casinos got richer and small businesses
No,
suffered?
there was a lot of,
That's a
there was a
success?
lot of, yeah, that's the press-driven narrative, right?
Damn media.
There's a lot of other businesses that benefited as a result. There was a lot of small businesses that were vendors as part of the race, and, all the nuances of something of that magnitude. And it was a huge benefit. I mean, the revenue generated, granted, it was over a longer period of time, but it was greater than the Super Bowl. And the
Great.
Super Bowl was awesome.
Yeah, it was. Except,
So my long-winded answer to your question is, I anticipate it's going to get better. So
I'm really interested in your philosophy of economic development and diversification. Like, I thought at one time maybe you were not as gung-ho as some other governors have been on tax incentives to get businesses here, to keep businesses here. Have you developed a philosophy on what's good economic development and what isn't?
wage-driven. That's my idea of economic development. So, we've been caught in the doldrums of logistics and the moving of goods and services in the state of Nevada outside of our traditional economic drivers, which is, mining and gaming and agriculture. And logistics was a huge part of it because of the proximity of our major urban areas, I-80 and I-15. But those aren't well-paid jobs, and manufacturing is the idea, the ability to make things within the state of Nevada that are not water resource detrimental, and to have moved those through the logistics change in the state of Nevada because of our tax environment, right, and the incentives that we provide to bring your companies here. And, the return on those incentives is 1 to 40. A lot of people don't realize that it's short-term pain for a long-term gain. And the return on, what I mean by that, for every dollar that we subsidize, we get $40 in return. And that's important for people to realize. And that drives up the education available revenue, through the sales tax and property taxes and the modified business tax and all the C tax that goes along with the driving the economy. And manufacturing is the key, and that's the direction I go at to recruit in that particular geography.
What about tax incentives? Should we just give them away like you guys gave away to the A's to get them here or not?
1 for 40. 1 for 40. So, and and some of those are different. This movie, I don't know, incentive tax, I don't know what the vernacular is that are using to that's a different model that's coming forward. A lot of people say, oh, here we are, we're going to give away, tax incentives to the movies. No, this is production versus tax incentives. The other ones is tax incentives on the front end. Don't leave here saying I'm signing off on the movie deal. So
It sounded like it.
Is
there going to be a special session?
there's a lot of discussion in education and working of the pen before that happens. We're a long ways off from that.
Well, wait a second. You brought it up. You brought it up. You seem
Well, I
to
just
favor
answered
it.
it.
You seem to favor it. Is there going to be a special
No,
session?
I like economic diversification, but the model has to fit. The model has to fit, and it can't be a burden on the general fund of the state.
Do you not like the word special session? Are you not hearing me? Do you want to have a special session?
No, I don't like the word special session. I don't like it. I don't like it.
Is it possible to have one to get that film tax thing going?
Everything's a possibility.
Oh, here we go. Are you telling me then that my Bills can't actually get into the Super Bowl?
Man, that's a cross you carry, man. That's a cross you carry. That's the
But
burden.
seriously, I mean, is it under consideration, Governor? I won't belabor this. Is it
The what?
a special session for the film tax?
Is it under consideration? At this point, no.
Okay. The A's are still coming for sure, right? You have no doubt?
Nothing's 100%. Nothing.
Really?
I've had a very very good conversation with John Fisher, who is the owner of the A's, yesterday, with the release of the renderings of the stadium and where they're at. There's a partnership discussion taking place on that with the owners of the land and Bally's. And so, as you can imagine, that's a complicated issue. But if as I sit here today, I could give you a 95% success rate with the A's coming.
All right, I'm going to move on to the election season in a second and talk about some of your favorite subjects. But real quickly, a couple other issues I wanted to ask you about. And
You know what, let me change that. I'll give you 99%.
99%?
Yeah, there you go.
Really? Wow.
Because somebody will go in here and blow that up.
That's called quoting the governor. So, after all this time, the state vacancy rate is still really high, Governor, and you directed the executive branch state employees to come back to work. They don't have a lot of flexibility. Can we compete with the private sector where there's a lot more remote work going on? Are you concerned about that at all?
I would be lying if I said I wasn't concerned, but there is flexibility built in there. Every individual classification is evaluated with that. First and foremost, I want them to be back because we're a service agency, and I want them to actually answer the phone in person and deal with confidential information that you shouldn't have access to within your own residence. And we provide public safety, right? And teachers can't work from home, and higher education can't work from home. So there's a lot of nuances, but individual jobs are being evaluated by the directors, and they have to justify the need to work from home, whether it's in totality, whether it's a hybrid, or whether it's not happening.
So there is flexibility.
There is flexibility, and that direction was given. And my biggest measurement of that is, how am I going to measure your productivity if you are working from home? And if you don't have a measurement stick for that, don't even broach the question, okay? We're a service agency, and we can't provide service from home. There are some functionality in state government that is well conducive to working from home, but the totality of it that we went through COVID, we're not even close to that, all right? So you brought up percentages of vacancies. So when I took over the state, we were hovering across the entire state 25% vacancy factor. So we're an organization of 25,000 employees. So 25% is a big number. It's a big number. So since we implemented raises, for state employees, having them return to the workspace, we've reduced that vacancy by 6%. 6%. But more importantly, there's two key components of that vacancy where we were really hurting. So we were in the 35th percentile in state police, and we were in the 40th percentile in corrections. That's a huge number. So correction, since I took over, wages and everything else goes along with it, they've had an 18% reduction in vacancy, and state police, they've had a 6% reduction. So we're going in the right direction. The fallacy that if I made them come back to work, they're going to quit, it's not there.
Okay. One last question before we talk about the election, and that is something else that you and I have talked a lot about, both privately and publicly, and that's what a searing experience when you were sheriff 1 October was for you. And there seems to be this incredible intractability, not just here but everywhere, between the Republican point of view on gun control and the Democratic point of view on gun control. Listen, you have more experience in this than most people who becomes a governor. What can be done? Are you just going to say that no gun control is going to work? I don't think you believe that.
I don't believe it.
I don't think you do. What can be done? What should be done? Or is this, we can talk again, rope in mental health, but what can be done, or can nothing be done?
So that will take us till 12 o'clock, right? No, some people giggled at that, but it's true. It's a very, very complicated issue because of the Constitution, all right? And your perception of the Constitution and the validity of the Constitution.
You mean the Second Amendment is what you're talking about,
Yeah,
right?
the Second Amendment.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of courts that have opined on this particular issue, in particular to last year in '23. I could count 5 courts that opined on different gun control measures. So in Maryland, they opined on assault weapons. They said it was unconstitutional. You go into New Jersey, they opined on high-capacity magazines. They said it's unconstitutional. You go into New York, they opined on carrying a concealed weapon in a public space, unconstitutional. You bring us back to Nevada, and we talk about some of the bills that came forward in the last legislative session. One was misdemeanor crimes, prevention of people, the charging of individuals that have been convicted of a hate crime in the misdemeanor level in possession of a gun, or preventing them from possessing a gun. That is a huge slippery slope when you start going down into the regular progression of felonies versus misdemeanors. And then that just opens up Pandora's box. So that I said no to that. You go into the different, so you got into ghost guns within Howdige's bill, and that was determined unconstitutional by Rigsby versus Delaware. So that opinion had already opined by the Supreme Court out of Delaware, but it was brought forward into Nevada. It didn't pass constitutional muster. Then you go into age, 18 to 21. That failed in California in the Ninth Circuit, and Toon failed in the Eastern District of Virginia. So there's a lot of courts that have made decisions based on these, and it isn't, I'm against gun control because I vetoed those bills. They don't pass constitutional muster, and that's a waste of money and everybody's.
I don't want to belabor this, or you're right, we would be here until midnight, because there are a lot of nuances, but
why it did, so there were a couple bills that did pass, reference gun control, that was for ex-felons in possession, people in possession of a firearm, dealing drugs. Those increases did it. Parolees in their ability to obtain their gun rights post conviction and release. We identify that. And then here's one that was Canizaro's bill. It was unknown to me that when you were arrested, say you're an ex-felon, you're in possession of 20 firearms, you could only be charged for 1 count on that. We changed that bill to be charged with 20 counts on that. So you got to chip away at that apple, and you have to ensure that it passes constitutional muster. So there are ways to address gun control. And what I've said this from the very beginning, even back in my previous career, there's a lot of existing laws that prosecutors have to adopt and enforce, and that will control a lot of things that we deal with it, to include mental health resources.
I mean, as sheriff, and again, I don't want to go on too much longer with this, but I mean, as sheriff, I'm sure some nights you went home and you told your wonderful wife who was here, God, I wish there weren't so many guns on the street. It makes our job so much more difficult, and I can't believe person X got a gun. Let's just do this exercise. I know it's a hypothetical, but indulge me. I'm really begging you. If you were master of the universe, using your experience as sheriff, what gun control, let's just take the Constitution out of it for just a second, and I don't mean that facetiously, Governor. What do you think would actually work? What would work?
There's a couple of things at top of mind. One is mental health resources. I mentioned that, and the ability for individuals that have been adjudicated by the court and preventing them from obtaining a firearm. Here's something that 99% of you in the room don't know. So say you are adjudicated by the court and determine that you can no longer possess a firearm, and that is codified where? You have the answer. All right? So when a law enforcement is addressing this individual, they have no knowledge of this database. So that's a huge number. Okay, some of these mass shootings that you see across the United States take place, and the kids were, put into, like some of the school shootings, they were put into, counseling, and they were adjudicated by the state to be incompetent or incapacitated due to mental illness or deficiencies. Nobody was aware of that. Nobody got notified of that. Nobody ensured that they were or were not in possession of the firearms. Nobody out and recovered those firearms. There's red flag laws that have been presented in the past, but they didn't pass constitutional
You like
muster.
that idea, though, red flag?
I like red flags with judicial review and the opportunity for the individual that it's addressing to have a day in court. Red flag was arbitrary and capricious, in the forms of terrorism in that space, and it didn't have the individual with their Second Amendment didn't have their day in court. Didn't have their day in court. And so those are two key issues on that space. And universal background checks, I think, are very beneficial. They're nuanceable in every state. And one of the things I've pushed back on, a lot of people aren't aware, is constitutional carry. And that is from my previous career. I think people that are in possession of a firearm should have a modicum of training to be able to possess that firearm. And that comes when you apply for your concealed weapon. And constitutional carry is any and all of you can go out, no matter what your background is, outside of being an ex-felon, purchase a gun, you can carry it open carry or concealed carry without any concern. And that's unacceptable to me. And I have been beat up by the gun lobby reference that stance. And I'm going to hold that because there's some cops that shouldn't be carrying a gun, all right?
Whoa.
And that's because they have a difficulty of qualifying, and they require extensive training just to have an understanding in the utilization of a firearm, and it's very troublesome to know that any random citizen, no matter what their mental stability is, can possess a gun.
Well, now that you've scared everyone in the room, let's move beyond that. Let's talk.
No, but I'm not gonna leave that. I am pro firearm, okay? I'm pro Second Amendment. But I think everything requires a look at and modification.
Wouldn't it be great if you could sit down with Democrats like this and talk about this issue in the
But-
rational
but-
way that you are
Right,
now?
exactly. And here's the key. When was the Second Amendment written, right? And what was available in the firearm space back then as compared to today, right? And people say, well, assault weapons. Well, what is an assault weapon? And what is the modification of it? Is it 30 bullets? Is it 50 bullets? And all those things. And I have opined on high-capacity magazines, and I said, I'm good with what the manufacturer recommends. That's why I say we can go till 12
We
o'clock.
could, but I appreciate you being so candid about this,
so-
Governor. I really do. Let's talk about some election stuff, then a few wrap-up questions, and I'll let you escape. I'm going to mention a word that is probably the most dreaded word that you can hear now. Do you know what that word is? Supermajority.
I thought you were going to say Trump.
Did you get that, Gabe? Where are you? Anyhow, we'll get to that.
Oh, I know you're going to get to that. That's no secret.
But seriously, I mean, Governor, this situation has not existed in the time that I have been covering politics here in a long, long time, where one party had a supermajority and the governor was of a different party. You've got to be very worried that this could happen. Tell us how worried you are and what you're willing to do to stop that from happening.
Well, I'm very worried. Fingers crossed. I wasn't elected in the last session, right? I was just prior to the session, but I was trying to be governor, and I wasn't trying to prevent a supermajority. And let me back up. Single party rule does not work. Okay, it does not work, and it'll surprise everybody in this room. Gavin Newsom told me so. So we had a discussion last year. And he asked me about my situation at the legislature, and I told him we were one vote away from a supermajority in both houses. And he goes, "Oh, that does not work." He goes, "People think I'm an extreme liberal," and I go, "Yeah, so do I." But he says my legislature is even more extreme, and he has a supermajority of the same party. It does not work. Because there's not discourse, there's not consensus, there's not discussion. It's just like, take it, and that's where we're at. And society can't function that way, especially in the political realm. We have to have that discourse and discussion and consensus, and it won't take place if it's a single-party rule. So prior to the last session, one vote away in the Senate from a supermajority, and so you have to coalesce the caucuses the entire time, because if one senator had strayed from what we believed in as a party, you have to deal with that, right? So here we go into another session, and I had no control of that. I was worried about being the governor. I wasn't thinking about supermajorities at the legislative session. I'd deal with that and try to communicate and partnership my way through it. Now we come into the current situation. The Democrats are trying to achieve a supermajority because they believe that's to the benefit of the state, which I absolutely disagree with. I wouldn't want a supermajority out of both houses on the Republican side, right? It just doesn't work. And we got to have that little push and pull. So in the situation, both in the Assembly and the Senate, I have put my name to candidates. I have vetted candidates. I've identified candidates. I have recruited candidates. I'm raising money for candidates to help with their success, to ensure that we prevent that. And I'm preoccupied with that currently, not to the detriment of my job as the governor, and not to the detriment of my wife and my family, but to prioritize what is needed for the state.
I think preoccupied was probably a good verb. By the way, the headline tomorrow now is Lombardo, Newsom got it right.
Newsom got it wrong, so.
Anyhow, so preoccupied with, I guess, and you have endorsed candidates. You've made a point of in endorsing candidates. What are you worried might happen in this state? Paint the apocalyptic picture for the folks here and the billions in China watching on the live stream. What a state with a super, because you might as well go to Maui if there's a supermajority.
I wouldn't say Maui, but I think I might have my feet up on my desk quite a bit. But my responsibility is to still communicate and make people aware of the detriment of flawed policy, okay? And is it a benefit of the few versus the whole, or the majority? And try to communicate your way through that. So, leadership.
But by any means necessary, you're going to use dark money, you're going to do all kinds of things to make sure that there is not a supermajority? How far will you go?
Well, I don't even know what dark money is.
Yes, you do.
No, I don't. No, I don't.
Okay, it's money that's not disclosed.
Okay.
The source of which is not disclosed.
Are we going to use dark money on the other side of the aisle?
Probably. But I'm asking you.
So, no, I'm going to use everything available to ensure success.
You have this PAC that keeps putting out this phrase, and I'm wondering, I assume you believe in it since it's a PAC affiliated with you, that there's a culture of corruption in Carson City among the Democrats. You believe that?
Yes, I do.
Really?
Yes, I do. And here's why. There's zero transparency in the legislative branch. And so everybody opines or stands up on the high and say transparency is needed in government. I agree. It is in the executive branch, all right? And there's public information laws and FOIAs and everything else that goes along with transparency. It is null and void on the legislative side. I, as the executive branch leader who controls the state budget, has no insight into the legislative budget. Just give it to me, Governor, and don't ask any questions. And is it being used appropriately? There's no transparency on the ethics side and their ability or their wherewithal or to investigate ethics complaints. There's no transparency on the readout of bills in the last 2 weeks of the legislative session. So there's a lot of nuances, and Heidi Kasama, I applaud her all day long with the bill drafts that she's presented as early as yesterday, and that's exactly the path that I wish to go down as far as eliminating or that perception of corruption.
For those who don't know, Heidi Kasama has presented, has put into bill draft form a bunch of so-called transparency measures, including the shocking idea that bills should be posted for 72 hours before they're voted on, and the legislature's exempt from the open meeting law, and it does.
Guess where they do that?
Yeah,
California.
Yes. Newsom was right again. And anyhow, But Governor, seriously, I mean, I have to ask this question. I mean, culture of corruption, your buddy and the head of the Republican Party in Nevada is under indictment, and you're going to accuse other people of corruption?
Yes.
Really?
Yes.
Does it bother you that the head of the Republican Party is...
Yeah, it bothers me, but we were talking about the legislative process.
You were
in the
talking about
legislative
it.
body. So.
But I mean, aren't you upset about what those fake electors did? They
Yeah,
tried to undermine democracy in this state.
They're going to have their day. They're innocent till their day in court, right? Till their day in court, and I do personally have a personal angst with what was conducted there. I don't understand the need to even have it done, but that's the path they chose to go down, and we'll see how the chips fall.
Speaking of your party, you appointed, from what I understand, I don't know her, but from everything I've heard, this woman who was really well-credentialed, great experience to the Washoe County Commission. Do you remember that?
Yes.
Remember her name?
Yeah, Clara. She's
Claire.
here.
Is she? Good.
Yeah.
I'm glad she's here. Let me ask you a question, Governor.
right there.
Okay, good. Your friends in the Washoe County Republican Party excommunicated her. Now, this is a joke, of course, because they can't...
I don't know if they're my friends, because they told me they're not my friends.
Yeah,
so.
they attacked you.
Yeah.
They attacked you as well. And you know what they're upset with her about? They're upset with her mostly for actually trying to get stuff done with Democrats.
I agree with you. And it's unfortunate.
Why aren't you outraged about this? You
I
should
am
be.
outraged. I've had several conversations with the players in the space, and I've been very, very, very vocal on my absolute support for Clara. So.
You see how I'm walking you into all these great applause lines? You're welcome. So, abortion is going to be a big issue for the Democrats, as you know, and they're trying to get something in the Constitution. They're trying to get that qualified. You're aware of this. If that gets qualified, will you vote for it?
So you're talking about the one they're doing the signature gathering now?
Correct.
Will I vote for it?
Yeah.
No.
Are you worried about...
Will I fight it? No.
Why not?
Because I understand the will of the people. If the will of the people want it, I'll support it.
You don't want to talk about this issue, do you?
Well, I'll talk about it all day.
Don't you think it's a problem for the Republican Party that...
Yeah, I think it's a huge problem, and I've been vocal about it. There's a big difference between your personal beliefs and the will of the people, and your role in that decision-making process. And state of Nevada, it polls in the majority. My personal belief is pro-life with exceptions, all right? But I'm not going to wield that hammer onto the people. It's the will of the people and their decision which direction that should go. So.
Fair enough. Speaking of things on the ballot, let me quote from your State of the State again. And you talked about, you have been, I think, straightforward since I've asked you about these questions. You were never one of these, Biden didn't really win the election. You chafed at that. But you have been concerned about certain things. And you've talked about voter ID, and you've talked about ballot harvesting. And you said if the legislature can't make meaningful progress in this critical area, these reforms should be placed before the voters during the next election. So, voter ID, you think should be on the ballot.
Yes.
Do you think ballot harvesting should be outlawed?
No, I think it should be modified and controlled.
How so?
I think the number of ability for an individual, the total number of ballots they can harvest should be measured. And I think training should go along with it. And the people that are allowed to do it, it should be measured.
Do you think that it's, I don't want to get into who's responsible for the doubts that people have for election integrity, but are you worried about, forget about the presidential election for a second, I'll get to it though. Are you worried that so many people in your own party don't believe that elections are fair and free and absent of fraud?
Yeah, I am. And a lot of that is based on perception, and a lot of that is based on fact. Okay, and
Well,
I've
what's the fact
Well,
that
I've
it's
said
based
it
on?
publicly. It's a human-driven system, and with a human-driven system, you're going to have some problems, right?
But mistakes
does
are different, though.
Well, you're right. You're right. But does it drive to the level of changing an election? And I don't believe so. But I think you should put every available resource or stopgap into place to minimize that perception.
Okay, just a few more questions. You'll be, unless you want to stay longer.
No.
Okay, that's what I thought. Are you going to endorse in the Republican primary for the U.S. Senate? It's a really important race.
Yes, I am.
You're going to endorse Sam Brown?
More than likely.
Okay. That's a yes, right?
Yeah, yes.
Okay, all right.
No, it's just a matter of
Yeah, I know.
timing, and I haven't had the conversation with him yet, and now
It's okay, he's watching somewhere.
but him and I are close, and we've had numerous talks about his campaign, and I'm going to support him.
So, we only have about 3 hours left, so let's talk about Donald Trump for that 3 hours. No, I'm kidding, just ask you one question. I mean, you endorsed him. You feel good about endorsing him? You're going to campaign with him? When you and I last had one of these sessions, you were really given pause by the indictments as a former law enforcement guy. You said they gave you pause. But you appear to be now like every other Republican elected official, accepting the inevitability that he's a nominee and everything's cool and Trump's my guy. Is that right?
Yes, that's right. Okay, I'm supporting Donald Trump. I publicly say I endorsed him. And to go back to your original statement about it didn't sit well with me on the indictments, there's a lot more information that's come forward since then.
What does that mean?
It means there's more evidence, there's more knowledge associated with those indictments that I didn't have previously. And he's innocent until proven guilty, and I'm looking forward to his day in court.
And so you think he's probably innocent
Well,
based on that?
so let's forget all that.
Okay.
Let's talk about Biden, Trump, right? I feel the world was safer under Trump. I feel that the economic outlook, especially for Nevadans, as far as the interest rate and the inflation space, we were better off, okay? And I think the foreign policy, I talked about the world was safer, and I think the quality of life and / support of police and what they're trying to achieve in that quality of life was robust under Donald Trump. I don't believe it's the same under Joe Biden.
Your enthusiasm level for Donald Trump on a scale of 1 to 10, with 1 being I'm doing what I have to do to 10 being I love the guy.
Next question.
I'll take that as a 1. Real quick, these are quick questions for you. There's been a lot of stuff in the press, and I'm sorry if I've missed it, and if any of my reporters got a quote from you, they're going to be mad at me, but about this Postal Service thing in Reno, where they're directing they want to direct the mail to Sacramento. Forget about mail ballots, which is going to be an issue for someone in your party. It seems totally cockamamie idea, doesn't it?
Absolutely, and
What are you doing about it?
Well, I authored a narrative. Now, granted, it's a federal entity, right? So I have limited authority associated with that, but I can express my opinion. Our federal delegation already expressed their opinion and their dissatisfaction with that decision, and so has the Washoe, people that live in Washoe and everybody else. Everybody knows the nuances, but I wanted to survey the state, different functions within the state, and to determine whether it would be a detriment to us. And yeah, it is in health services and SNAP benefits and things like that, and the delay of that. DMV is very troubled by it because of the delay in receiving titles and transactions via DMV. And more importantly, you mentioned the Secretary of State. Cisco's here tonight, and
He is?
we had a conversation.
He can come up and sit there after you?
Yeah, he can
Okay.
come up and it's a detriment in the election process, and the fear of of delaying it even further than our current design of elections, unknown weather patterns, whatever it may be. But it just doesn't make sense for the modicum of savings associated with the totality of the United States Postal Service budget. And for, we have a very robust population up here in northern Nevada, and they deserve better service. So the long-winded answer to that question is that letter was authored today. I signed it, and it will be submitted to the postal inspector with knowing limited authority.
So have you sent us that letter so we have it?
No.
Oh, okay. Well, we'd appreciate that. I want to ask you real quickly, I think this issue has been totally overblown, and we've talked about it before, this ethics commission, and you wearing your uniform during the race, and they came up with this fine, and you're appealing it. Why not just say, this is stupid, I'm just going to I'll pay the fine. It doesn't really mean much that they censure you. You did know the law, I assume, and you knew what you were doing probably was borderline, but now you're like essentially trying to erase the ethics commission.
Well, you said it. It's stupid. So,
quote me on that.
I did know the law. And here's why I knew the law. Well, it wasn't law. It was an opinion.
Right.
Now, the ESTA committee, they don't make law. They make opinion. So previously in my law enforcement career, and I'm going to give you the Reader's Digest on the best I can on this because it's a long, convoluted issue that obviously hasn't come out in the press, all the details. But there was 3 opinions provided by the Ethics Commission associated with sheriffs. So that's discriminatory on its face value, right? You have judges, you have sheriffs, and you have governors, you have senators, you have legislators. So that a sheriff couldn't use the accoutrements of their office while campaigning, even if you were the incumbent. And they were in converse with each other. They were in conflict with each other, each one of those opinions. The lasting opinion said it was okay. Okay, so now I'm running for governor, right? And I'm wearing my, my uniform associated with the profession I chose and provided as part of my campaign because I'm very proud of it, and I think it makes a difference in evaluating who your governor candidate is. And the opinion that was last received by me out of the Ethics Commission, I was within the limits of that liability. And they chose a different direction. And it doesn't sit well with me. And if I accepted the censure, you even opined on the ridiculousness of a $1.6 million fine and all the other things that goes along with it, which they reduced to $20,000 and a censure. That doesn't sit well with me, and if I don't fight it, I would regret it. And you know what? And when I run for re-election, it'll be a tool that somebody tries to use against me because people only see it at the face, not the details. So
you and I agree on this. I think it's totally ridiculous. You were sheriff. You can dress as a sheriff. A judge should be able to dress as anyhow. Don't anyone quote me as saying I agreed with them on this. Last question. Well, I'll ask you one last question after this. So, do you think... Hey, I got the microphone. So in January, the Clark County Teachers Association filed this petition to change the law so that teachers can go on strike. Do you think public school teachers should be able to strike?
No.
Okay. See how easy that one was?
No. There's an opinion, especially with government service, that strike is illegal because of the service and the resources that are needed by the public. And I think teachers are part of that formula. And it was opined recently, not recently, but previously on that. And I think collective bargaining works. And I think you have to give it its due in solving your problems because it was determined by people prior to us, and it's been a successful model. I think their decision to want to strike was out of frustration on the previous negotiations, and I think the issues with that angst and that frustration should be addressed, not to allow a strike to happen.
Governor, I want to conclude with this question, and I hope you'll be as candid as you can be about this. Are you enjoying the job
Yes.
or less than you thought you would?
No, I'm enjoying it more, I tell you. And here's why. Challenge and recognition are the two motivators in the human genome. So this is obviously a challenge, and it's a motivator because I could see really positive change at a higher level than when I was the sheriff. So as the sheriff, laws were put upon me, and it was my duty to enforce them, and hopefully you changed and created an environment of safety for folks. But as the governor, you get to weigh in on those laws and the resources that the state level government is to provide to the people. And you get to see that positive effect.
Governor, as you know, I've been around a long time, done this a long time. Your willingness to sit and have a conversation like this, not just once, not just twice, but 3 times in your first 14 months is a real testament to you. You and I are going to disagree on stuff we have in the past and we will in the future, but to have a conversation like this, I hope you'll all give him a round of applause for his willingness to come and do this.
So just to build off John, and thank you, John, for your comments and for tonight's events, but just to build off what he just said, you and I are going to disagree, and we're going to agree on some things and disagree on some things. That's government, right? Single party rule don't work, all right? I'm going to throw that plug out there, and please evaluate your decisions as we move forward.
Thank you, everyone. I appreciate your coming tonight.
John and the governor, thank you very much. Everyone, give him a big hand. Thank you guys very much for coming today. Appreciate it. If you haven't been to the museum since your 4th grade or your prom, we encourage you to walk around a little bit. We're going to keep it open. We have 240 amazing automobiles. We're going to keep it open for the next 30 minutes. Enjoy and please come back. Thank you. Thank you, Nevada Independent, very, very much.